Namaste, everyone. Thank you very much for coming along and providing us with this opportunity to talk about something that is really important. This event is timed and run in cooperation with an Australian foundation, and they have a day. It's called Dying to Know Day. Cool or what? Dying to Know. And some really quite extraordinary facts. 70% of people in Australia and New Zealand have never had a conversation or discussion about death. 70%. Yet 60% of people think there should be discussions or conversations about it. So our hope and desire here is, in cooperation with this foundation in Australia, is to try and encourage people to begin this very important conversation. They have this old saying, there's only two things that you can guarantee on in your life: death and taxes. We're not going to talk about taxes. Given its certainty and its inevitability, it is quite surprising that there is so little conversation. And in my experience in life, this is because people don't know what to say, they don't know how to start the conversation, and they don't know how to carry on with it. It's treated as if it is some morbid or scary event. Isn't it, or not? I was talking to some people last weekend, about how when you raise the prospect of death, how people get really freaked out by it. There's like this really visceral reaction to death. And somebody had showed me one of these weird YouTube comedy things. How they set up these different pranking people. And they had an elevator in this building, and it was like a fake elevator. It wasn't really working. And there was all sorts of cameras set up inside. And somebody would walk in and then choose the floor and press the button. And just at that time, somebody would come rushing along and hold the door open and say, "Just one moment, please." And they'd bring in a coffin into the elevator and stand it up against the wall. And you'd see people's reaction on their face. It's like just this wooden thing standing against the elevator wall is already, people are like in panic. Some people are cool, but mostly people are quite panicked. And then the person's holding the door and he says, "Just 1 second," and then runs out like he's going to get something. And of course the elevator door closes. And then it starts moving like it's going up, but it's actually not. It's just staying there moving. And then people are kind of like, physically they are moving away from the coffin against the wall. And then it was like the lid on the coffin is divided in half, for the viewing coffin. And so the top just suddenly flops open and somebody flops out and they've got like cotton wool stuffed in their nose and, just poof, like this. And people scream. They not exaggerate, literally, they scream. And they just go into this total panic. And while it was sort of like, yeah, of course, there's the comedy aspect to things, if we actually stop and look at it, if it wasn't a joke, this reaction that was like so common, they did it over and over and over again, this reaction is really astonishing and shows how little we are prepared to actually think about and deal with the reality of death. And I maintain that our refusal to deal with this actually impacts the quality of our life. Not only does it impact us when we have to deal with death, particularly of someone close to us, or more importantly, when that event will happen to me. But it also makes it so that we live a life that is less responsible. If we accepted the reality that we are temporary visitors in this body, in this life, in this place, that it shall pass, then I think we would be a lot more thoughtful about how we engage in relationships, how we deal with other people. The values that we hold as being important will actually become really deeply affected. And if people were more thoughtful about this, I maintain that they would live in societies that are far more humane, far more compassionate, far more caring. And so the topic is actually really, really important and can have a profound and pronounced effect on our just day-to-day life. We okay? When people are diagnosed with a terminal illness, everybody feels utterly shocked. Not only the person that is diagnosed with the illness, but when the news is relayed to family members and friends, everybody, it's like somebody's been hit in the guts with a baseball bat or something. It's just like, and this unwillingness to accept that this is actually a natural part of life in this body. It is incredibly natural. This life in this body will come to an end. And it is important for us to become so what's the right word? What we're talking about, my hope is that you will feel hope as a result of this conversation. One of the big problems with this, dealing with this reality of death, is that we don't know what to do. We have lived this life, which is a huge fantasy, that it's just going to go on and on. Like a child's, I was talking last week in Whangamata on this thing about mindfulness and happiness. And it's just like the kids' stories and the love stories. The ending, they lived happily ever after. I'm sorry, it doesn't work like that. That is not true. Does it therefore mean that you cannot live a happy life? Does it mean that death must be incredibly morbid and utterly tragic? The answer is no. It shouldn't be tragic. To be sad is fine, but to take it to this other level. I have a little bit of a hard time with this word grief, because there are so many different understandings. Grief and lamentation. I just looked it up on the internet this morning, and we have a couple of definitions. Grief is described as intense sorrow, especially caused by someone's death. And then we have lamentation, which is a passionate expression of grief or sorrow, such as intense weeping. Then I looked at how people attempt to deal with things. And psychologists have sort of tried to nicely move things into little boxes for everyone. And they have categorized that there are 5 stages of grief. And I think that these are actually accurate and true. The first is denial. The second is anger. Third is bargaining. Please, not now. The fourth is depression. And then comes acceptance. And they say people normally go through these stages, and there's no time fixed to when you move from one stage to another. And sometimes people don't move on. They have great difficulty moving on. So we would like to be able to address some of these things. When we talk on the subject, you notice we're talking about understanding death and dying. There's always 2 perspectives. There's the perspective and the experience of the person who is losing someone that is very dear to them. That's the death part. The dying is the perspective of the person who is going through the event. I will refer to it as an event. These are 2 completely different perspectives. And in dealing with it, we often see that people are not very thoughtful about the experience of the person that is about to undergo this event, who is dying. It's often, you see it, people will become very, I have to use the word selfish, where they start crying, no, you can't, don't leave me. And I've seen these things and I'm going like, oh my God, can you imagine what it's like for the person that's lying there, knowing that they have no control of what's going on, knowing that they're about to go through this experience. And then someone that's very close to them, that they really care about, is begging them not to do this. You put such a burden on the person that is going through the experience. So hopefully when we get through things today, we will cover both those perspectives and talk a little bit about what is the actual duty of one who is about to face death, the duty of a caregiver or family member or intimate friend who is going to now assist someone in this part of their life. And the most wonderful thing about it is, you know what? It doesn't have to be a bummer. It can become this most amazing experience. If people understand what is happening and they know what their role is, how they are going to participate, what to expect, and how to go through this whole experience. Wow, so quiet in here. One of the great things about what I'm going to call the Eastern perspective, I took up the practice of yoga when I was about 14. I was living in Tarawa, of all places, and desperately looking for someone who could help guide me in my spiritual development, in my understanding of what is life? What is life? Where do I fit? What is my purpose? What am I meant to be doing? I was like really deeply lost in these kind of ideas. And I was always very troubled by meeting people that sort of offered or held out or promised the possibility of knowledge, and turned out to basically be fakes. That was utterly disappointing, and by the time I was 18, I had come to the erroneous conclusion that nobody knows anything, everybody's just guessing. And I was thinking, what the hell am I going to do? How am I going to find my way through this life and come to some real knowledge and understanding? Well, I was very fortunate. Within a relatively short period of time, I met a great spiritual personality who completely transformed my life. I went off to India and lived as a monk for about 2.5 years, and then began a whole lifetime of personal experimentation. You know, the things that we're going to talk about now, they're not just ideas. They're not just mental things or, discussion points. They're meant to be about things that we consider in relation to our own life. And then a spiritual path means a path of actual experimentation, where one follows an actual process. I'm the laboratory, and I'm experimenting on myself, on my own consciousness, on my being, on my body, and I'm trying to find some truth. I want to experience the truth that I've been given. And so my great fortune was to actually become deeply influenced by a couple of very wonderful teachers. And they made it so I could take on board certain things, understandings. One of the very most important spiritual understandings is this. Well, before I go there, let me just round out something. Number one is we must embrace the reality without freaking out, without being negative, without being on a bummer or afraid, that death is an integral part of my experience in this body. That I will face this event. I will face it in others that are around me, and I myself will experience this reality. It is natural and it is normal. Just as birth is normal, death is also normal. This is the spectrum. And what occurs in between is not necessarily life. You might be just oblivious. For me, the experience of life is to discover and to live the knowledge of who I actually am. Now, a foundational understanding in all Eastern philosophies, and it's like pronounced, it is very deep, is this reality that this body which I have on is not me. In fact, it has very little to do with me. I will live out my life in it, and death is when I, the living being, the life force, the person, leaves that body. When that body is uninhabitable, this is what is called death. Unfortunately, the vast majority of beings in this world are completely overwhelmed by this false idea that the body that I have on is me. And that, for me, is extraordinary. It's mind-blowing. Don't worry, I came from that platform. It's not like I'm making a judgment. It's just, it never ceases to amaze me how we have so deeply lost the plot, how we've become so disconnected with these spiritual truths, these actually very foundational truths. If I really understood this principle, the way in which I would live, the choices that I would make, how I would deal with others, would also be really different. It would be really different. My life would take on a much more positive, a much happier. It would be a much happier experience if I actually understood this and lived in this realization, in this principle. There's few people walking around outside. Maybe we should open that door in case somebody wants to get in. They may think that we're all excluding people. So this fundamental spiritual principle or teaching is like at the foundation of living a life that is filled with harmony and with real understanding and with with increased purpose. This knowledge that you are, I'll step back just a little bit. Sometimes when I've spoken in schools, high schools and stuff, you hand out a little piece of paper to all the students and say, tell me just in a few sentences who you are. Tell me, who are you? And in 99.999% of the cases, people begin, I am male or I am female, I am a Kiwi, or wherever I am located, they'll attribute this to be part of your identity. I am this age, I am this tall, I weigh this much, I have this kind of complexion, my hair is like this. They go through a list of descriptions of the physical body. When people approach a coffin, do they do that much here? Like open coffins? Or not so much? I know the Maori are, they're full on awake. And where I've lived most of my life in Asia. And it's just like, this is part of what's going on. The coffin's open. This person has died, we're terribly sad. We go up, we look in, we say a prayer, we go down the back, we have something to eat, we sit around and talk with everybody, and this goes on for about 3 days before they get around to a burial. And it's kind of good because people, they find it easier to deal with things. I find in the Western world, we've really made this what we consider a more sophisticated and compassionate society where we shunt off the elderly so we don't have to deal with them too much. The people that are very sick are hidden away. The people that have mental illness are all, hidden away. Something like death, oh my God, just get rid of it, get this whole thing out of the way as quickly as possible. And we're not sort of like intimate, we don't live in extended families anymore. We don't witness births, which are amazing things to witness. And we usually don't witness deaths. And what that does to us, it actually dehumanizes us. It becomes a lot more about me and this time that I'm going to be here and what I can do and what I can get out of things. And, it becomes much more me-focused rather than us or we. And I find, and I hope I'm not offending anyone, I find that in cultures where you have this bigger appreciation of we and us, are really actually more dignified and civilized than the I and me cultures. And unfortunately, we are being pushed by a whole bunch of different forces more and more into the I and we world. I mean, this new word that everybody knows, the selfie. We become disconnected. I just saw these studies, I was reading them yesterday, where it shows since, and they've used 2007, the introduction of the iPhone as a sort of like point of reference. We've seen this massive decline in younger people of actual interaction. All of the positive things, even wanting to learn how to drive It's all following exactly the same path because people are living increasingly more insular lives. And of course, the more insular you become, the more difficulty you're going to have with your own death and with the death of those that you love. I'll tell you a little story. And I think it shows with great clarity and in reality, the importance of this understanding of my spiritual identity, me as being a spiritual being temporarily residing within a body. I had a very dear friend in India, in Mumbai. He was a Muslim, but he became very interested in yoga, and we had a wonderful friendship. He became a vegetarian and everything, and him and his wife and kids would always have me over, and it was great. I was doing business in India at the time, and I visited him one time. We had this meeting in a corporate office, and he asked me if we could go a little early because he wanted to visit his father in hospital. So I said, yes, sure, let's do it. So we went off to the hospital, and it was the first time I'd ever met his dad or his mum. And his dad looked gravely ill. And the mother was a very intelligent lady. She taught at university. She was a technocrat in the government. And she was a very strong person. So, and the brother had just come, the other brother from South Africa. So while we're in there, and my friend introduced me, Zahir, to his father, and so I greeted him. And then a doctor came and stood in the doorway. Everybody moved out. So I thought, I'll see what's going on. So I went over there and listened. And the doctor told them that the father had stage 4 cancer, that it was so advanced that there was nothing that they would be able to do. And the smart thing would be to take the father home and to take care of him, and they would help with pain management until he dies. And everybody was in utter shock. And then they had a conversation amongst themselves that they're not going to tell Dad anything about this because he is very fearful of cancer. And he's utterly fearful of death. And so they weren't going to say anything. So I took Zahir aside and I said, you absolutely cannot do this. This is the most cruel thing that you can do to your father. You're treating him like an animal that you're going to keep away in the shed and drug it out until this time comes, and then let him sort of like just drift off into death, like it's that easy. And I said that this is very, very cruel. You cannot do this. You need to tell your father what is happening. And you, because you understand some of these things we've been talking about for years now, you need to be able to help your father through this experience. You need to help him how to cope with it, how to think about it. There may be many things that he wants to settle before death. He may want to forgive people or speak to someone about something, and you can't deprive him of this. This is not dignified. So he said, okay, I'll talk to my mum and my brother. So they went out and they were sitting outside, and I could see them on the lawn. They were sitting on the lawn and having this extremely animated conversation and arguing. And then finally, after quite a considerable amount of time, everything settled down. And then they come and talk to me and they said, okay, we accept that we need to do this. So I asked, so who's going to talk to him? And everybody's going, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And nobody wanted to be the one to talk to him. They did not even know how to talk to him about something so significant. I thought that this was very sad, but this is not the only time. I've encountered this numerous times. So one of them turns to me and says, "Could you tell him?" And I said, "I just met him like 30 minutes ago, and all I said was hi, just a few pleasantries for 2 minutes, and you want me to tell him?" And they said, well, they figured I'd know the best way to tell him. And then they start begging me to do it. So I agreed. And I went and sat at his bedside, and he knew. You know, people think that like if you're dying, that somehow you don't know what's going on, you've lost the plot. Even if you're gravely ill, it's incredible how observant people that are passing from this world are. And they know what's going on. And so to lie or to deceive people is horrible. It's the worst thing that you can do. You know, you'll find that in many, and we see it very pronounced in Buddhism, but it's common within Hindu philosophies and most Eastern religions. There's a fundamental formula. The formula is ignorance equals pain. The more ignorant that you are, the more pain that you will experience. When a person becomes more knowledgeable and aware, even things that would normally be painful and difficult, they are experienced in a whole different way. It's like the sun rising in the morning and dissipating the darkness of night and a thick fog that sits over everything, and the sun just dissipates it, and then there's great clarity. So I spoke with him, and I said that I held his hand because he was, obviously very distressed. He could see that there's something really bad news going on here. And he was quite distressed. So I held his hand, and I told him, you probably saw, it's just a bird, it's fine. We'll worry about it later. We'll feed him and then help him get out the door. I think, everybody okay with the bird flying around? Just maybe watch your head when he flies over. So I held his hand and I told him, you noticed that the doctor had come and the tests have actually come back and the results are not good. And so he just like, he's like almost white. And he's just like, quite freaked. And then I told him, but you don't need to worry. I said, you are not going to die. I said, you will have to leave this body behind because it is gravely ill, but you should not worry. You are not going to die. You will be leaving this body behind. And what you need to do now is to spend the rest of the time that you have in this body in preparation for this event. So I began to advise him on what he needs to do. He was a Muslim, and so I suggested to him that it is better, and the doctors also say it is better that he goes home, back to their house, This is another thing that's quite astonishing. The vast majority of people who die in hospitals would rather die at home. But we don't let them. Like, it's going to make a difference if we keep them in the hospital. It's like, we just don't even know what we're doing and how we're dealing with these things. It's quite absurd. So I told them, you need to go home and you need to prepare, and you should become absorbed in chanting the names of God. They have 99 names in the Mohammedan religion of God. You need to become absorbed and meditating upon what these names mean, and to listen to appropriate verses from the Quran. Don't be in a situation where you're in any anxiety or having to deal with things. You need to become more inwardly focused and prepare for this event where you will pass. Do not be afraid. This is natural and this is normal. And as I was talking to him, tears started gliding down his cheek from his eyes. And he gripped my hand very tightly and he said, "Thank you very much." And his wife was just like astonished, because she had him pegged because of his previous reactions to someone that was just going to freak out. But when we are faced with these realities, people, if they are offered the proper direction and guidance, they face death in the most amazing manner. I've had the opportunity to sit at the bedside of quite a number of people. Some of them were great yogis who were leaving this world, and to be able to participate and assist them in this event. And it's the most astonishing thing when it is nicely organized and managed. And what happens to the people that become involved and are helping someone through this is that they don't go through this state of intense grieving and lamentation. This grieving and lamentation and these 5 things that was mentioned earlier, denial and anger and all of this all arises out of ignorance. I don't know if you've heard of this wonderful book called the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita is like one of the gold standards of Eastern spirituality. And I will just read, it states here that one who is wise laments neither for the living nor for the dead. And this is true. It doesn't say one does not become sad or feel some sadness in separation from someone that they grew to know very well and they had some nice connection with. Sadness is a natural part of things. But this lamentation where somebody is, I've seen these situations in my life where people scream, throw themselves on a coffin. I've seen situations where someone comes into a room where someone is dying and they beg them not to leave. And it's like, oh my God, how heartless can we be to impose such a terrible thing upon someone when they have no control over what's happening? So it is very important for us to get a perspective. This is natural and it is normal, not something to be freaked out about. The knowledge that I am actually a spiritual being makes it so if I even just understand that, even at the time of dying, if I can think about and you know what? We experience this reality. Usually we don't think about it very much. Our life is full of clutter and there's all this stuff going on and and we're just grinding away, and it's just like, we want to be busy and excited and happening and trying to pretend that life is just this festival, and it's not. It's not. Yes, there are very nice moments, there are good times, but there are also sad times. The nature of happiness within this world is this: it has a beginning. Anything that has a beginning will also have an end. It is inescapable. And things come in pairs. Opposite sides of the same coin. If you experience material happiness, you must also experience sadness. It will automatically be there. You don't have to search for it, nor can you prevent it. Things will happen. Having a really healthy spiritual foundation in this understanding is so transformative that even if it comes at that very last moment before death takes place, then the reaction is like, wow. The reaction is amazing. And to watch somebody go through that experience and breathe their last breath and leave that body behind in a completely relaxed way, not being fearful, not freaking out, is one of the greatest gifts that you can give to someone. You do not have to be a great spiritualist. You do not have to be spiritually advanced or anything. We're talking something that an ordinary, everyday person can participate in and share with others in their life. My father, he died about 11 months ago, and I was able to, before moving back to New Zealand, I was able to be back here and visit with him about 3 weeks before he left. My brother and sister had moved him into a home. We had had a lot of conversations, and he was sort of like, yeah, he kind of gets it. That's enough. We're watching TV now. He didn't really want to become too engaged. He felt confident that death wasn't going to be a freak out, because my mother had a near-death experience. She had a heart attack, and they revived her and everything. And she talked to my father about what she went through and what she experienced, leaving the body and then coming back into it. And she talked about it in this quite interesting way. And so he said, yeah, he understood that, and he was good with it. He's not freaked out about it. But then here he was, he got to this point where everything was shutting down. And then he suddenly tells me when I'm visiting him, he said, now that it is coming close, I actually am afraid. Then he said this really extraordinary thing. I was going to help him into this wheelchair and take him for a spin around the block, get him out of this home. And he said, I've always been really interested in what you're doing with your life. And I said, you mean like the kind of work I do? And he goes, no, what you're actually doing with your life. And then I'm going like, oh my God, why now? You know, for so long, I wanted to have this conversation with you. And so I thought, okay, you know, this is what it is. Now, my father was not very religious in terms of like conventional religion, but he did have some. He used to pray every day. He would spend some time in prayerfulness and thinking about things. And he was a very strong person, but at the same time, he never would do anything bad. He was quick to stand up to someone. I've seen him drop young guys, you know, who were hooligans and stuff in the street. So, you know, he was a tough guy, but at the same time, he would never do anything wrong and bad. Nor would he cheat anyone or purposefully do anything bad. He would always try to help people. So it was kind of like people liked him. You know, he had a nice kind of character. But I knew that he had a little problem. This problem that he had was that he thought that any kind of good spiritual outcome to his life was going to be dependent upon him. You know, this idea that he would have from his religious background, I've got to earn my way, earn my place in heaven. I've got to do all these things, I've got to be, you know, and it's by my worthiness, and I have to be worthy, that there will be some good spiritual outcome to my life. I told him that it's not really like that. You want to go here? We're doing all right? Yeah? This is actually really, really important. I told him that if we look amongst all the yoga processes and the different spiritual paths also all around the world, you will see that there are fundamentally two approaches to spiritual life or spiritual development. One is called the ascending process. And it's kind of like someone going to climb Mount Everest. What's the term that they use when they begin the climb? They call it an assault on the mountain. Don't they? I mean, that's a bit rude. You're going to make an assault on the mountain. And you're going to come with a team of people, and you have physically conditioned yourself. You've done high altitude training. You've got all of your rope techniques down. You know how to handle rock and ice climbing. You have all this proficiency. And now you're going to bring all your gear and establish your base camp, and then you are going to assault the mountain. So, what would happen if you went to sleep in your tent and then you woke up the next morning and the mountain had moved? Literally, it's moved 40 kilometers away. Shit! Pack up all the gear, and off we go. And we get a bit closer and we set up shop. We go to sleep and we wake up and it's moved somewhere else. You know, this idea of personal worthiness is somewhat of an impersonal idea. It is the idea, if we are going to consider the idea of myself and whether there is a higher being or whether there is a God or whatever, this idea that it's all about me and it is all up to me. And literally, it does not work. Literally, it does not work. Because you are never good enough. You are never accomplished enough. But it's a bit more important than that. There's something else that's going on. It has to do with what's called relationship. If I'm just lost in this world that it's all about me, I don't think about relationship. I try to impose my will. I try to impose myself on others. And I think I can do that spiritually as well. I told him, there is another approach. I don't know if any of you have been exposed to the yoga system. There's a very famous person that's considered one of the fathers of Ashtanga Yoga. His name was Patanjali. He wrote a book, a very brief one, very pithy, called the Yoga Sutra. And he goes through this whole explanation of all the technical proficiency that you need to attain this condition of what's called samadhi, a state of great spiritual grace and great spiritual experience. And then he's talking about how difficult it is to do and what's required, and you can practically, hardly anybody can get there. And even if you get there to this fantastic level, you can fall down from it. But there is one place that's better off, that's even more difficult to get to. And then he says, it's kind of like, just by the way, one can attain that position also through the process of surrender. And then he just moves on. He doesn't really talk about it. He doesn't really explain it. So when I spoke to my dad, I told him, this is a little bit of a problem that you have in your life, that you have felt that it was up to you to feel worthy. It was up to you to feel that you've done the right thing, and by your own efforts, you're going to go into you'll be in a state of grace. I told him that, it is possible for someone who is the most degraded and sinful, and these are words that have actually gone out of fashion, that you can be in total lowlife. You can be an alcoholic or a drug addict lying in the gutter, facing death, and you can say in a moment of clarity that I am nothing. I have no goodness in me. I have no strength. I am absolutely unqualified. I am unworthy. And in that condition, do what this Patanjali spoke about. In Sanskrit, it's called Ishvara Pranidhana. This word Pranidhana, it means literally, almost prostrating oneself on the ground, hugging the ground and saying, I am nothing, I am unworthy. If you do not lift me up, there is no hope for me. And instantly, everything changes. I have been in situations where I've seen people have this experience at the moment of death, and it is utterly, it's like the room is filled with light rather than darkness and sadness. It's just like this most amazing spiritual experience. This, in the yoga system, there is this understanding and appreciation that if I am to cross this ocean, the ocean of material life, and reach the other shore, I need a boat because I can't swim it. I can't do it under my own steam. And what is that boat? In the Eastern traditions, this boat is what I will call transcendental sound. They used what were called mantras, or spiritual sound. And this spiritual sound was something that people utterly took shelter in and had this experience of being able to walk through this doorway known as death without the tiniest tinge of fearfulness, without it being a tragic experience. And the people that assist in this event, they experience one of the most, it's more profound than a birth. Have you witnessed a child being born? It's like, it's really mind-blowing. I delivered or participated in 3 of my children, and it's just like, oh wow, all your hair stands on end. It's like the most incredible experience to see, a life appearing like this in this little tiny body, a person shows up. And it's more incredible to be able to assist and participate in also the exit when somebody leaves this world. But in order for this to become a very positive, a very wonderful experience, I'm not talking about a celebration in the, I'm glad that sucker's gone. I'm talking about a real spiritual experience that is exceedingly wonderful. Even if someone says, I have no belief in God, I have no acceptance of this, higher power or anything, okay, I don't mind. But if you could come to appreciate this principle and try this technique or method, even you yourself will have the most wonderful experience because of this. Wow, time flew by. Does anybody have any questions? Unfortunately, this is such a large and important subject that, the time that we've spent on it doesn't really do it justice. But I would really, really encourage you. The fact that you have come here today, for me, is a really amazing thing. And I think it's a very wonderful thing. And even with what you have heard today, if you were to take this with you and consider it, it can transform your life, and it can transform the life of others. You can have a profound effect on them. Anybody have a question? Feel free. And let me just state, I don't know, was this okay, or was this a bit too serious, or what? We're okay? Was it good? We got something out of it? Great. And so when it comes to talking about this subject, there is no silly question, there is no dumb question. These things are all important. And if I can help to shine some light, then I would like to do that. And then what we'll do is when we're done with that, if there is any questions, I'd just like to lead you in a little bit of a guided meditation to try and give you some tools for the toolbox of life, something that you can take with you to help you in dealing with these things. So yes.
I'm just curious, just now you mentioned your mom has experienced a stroke or something, and then she left the body and came back. Can you share with us, do you mind sharing with us what she experienced in that process?
She actually didn't talk to me very much about it, and I didn't know about it until the next time she had a heart attack and died, and it was after that that my dad told me about it. But it's the regular sort of things that people experience that he mentioned. Going into a brilliant and wonderful light, and then she was telling him that there is nothing to be afraid. It's okay. There's nothing to fear. But that not feeling fear comes from the experience that I can leave this body, but I continue to exist. One of the reasons that people are so, the main reason that everybody is fearful of death, why it hits us so hard when we see it or experience it, it is because of this reason. I had mentioned earlier that you and I are eternal spiritual beings. This body that you are occupying is not you. Is not you. This is a temporary vehicle that you're identifying with and using. When you have one of those near-death experiences and leave and end up returning to the body, the first thing that you understand is, hey, this body is actually not me. You experience that reality. For people that haven't come to this understanding, when they see a dead body, it's just like, it gives you the shudders. It creeps you out big time. It goes against everything that you feel in the core of your being. Your eternal spiritual nature is that you are eternal. But when we identify so intensely with the body, when we look at a dead body and we see that it looks as though life has come to an end, that goes against our deepest spiritual nature and the reality of who we are. We are eternal spiritual beings. And that is why death really is such a huge discomfort. It really shakes us and rattles us. If you've had one of these types of experiences, then it sort of makes it so that you look upon death and a dead body completely differently. It's not so scary. It's not a freak out. You have a perspective and you have an understanding. Okay? Anybody else? Yes?
As we know the time of the birth, so how do we know if death predestined or death of the time? Who decides? Who controls this?
In the Bhagavad Gita, it says, for one who is born, death is certain. There's this whole other, I'll just add a couple of things to it before I get to finally answering your question. When we look at a little baby, and we think, oh my God, it's so innocent. It's like a clean whiteboard. There's no mark on it. It's so innocent. We don't see that little guy showed up with heaps of baggage. You are not created at the time that you were conceived or born. You are an eternal spiritual being. And of course, in all Eastern philosophies, there is this understanding of reincarnation, that when you are born, you have lived previously and you have engaged in activity, you have done things that were good and things that were bad. And you must experience a result for every single action that you perform. Some of that you will settle in one lifetime. Some of it you will bring with you to your next body. That includes where you will be born, the financial or economic and social status of the family that you are born into, your opportunity for education, the general health of the body, whether it will be male or female or somewhere in between, whether you will have, what kind of opportunity you will have in life. All of these things that you bring with you are predetermined, not by someone else, but by your own action. Death also comes. There will be a predetermined time of death that is attached to that birth, but that can be altered. Just as in this lifetime you may be born into circumstance of great poverty, but by your strength of will and commitment and very hard work, you may rise to financial prominence. You don't have to be wherever you started off. That doesn't determine everything. The actions that you are performing in your life also contribute to destiny. Destiny is not like a fixed thing. It's constantly in flux according to your own desires and your own actions. So for instance, we have this shocking thing in New Zealand. I'm heartbroken when I read that 1 in 20 young people contemplate or attempt suicide every year. That is not a karmic reaction. That is an attempt, an inability to have a clear and healthy foundation for your life, where you don't have actual spiritual understanding. You are steeped in unhappiness and traumatic things, and you think the way out is to attempt to kill yourself. You cannot kill yourself. You can terminate this body and make it so you have to move on, but you cannot kill yourself. That is a wrong idea. Another subject I need to deal with here. And so, yes, there are things that you can do to alter what is meant to be your destiny in terms of, your allotted lifespan in this particular life. You can alter it, you can extend it also. Through spiritual undertaking, you can extend it. Okay? Don't worry about it. It's going to happen. You don't have to get too worried that maybe I'm going to die. No, you are going to die. You can stop worrying about that one. But that's okay. You need to learn how to deal with that reality. Yes? You have...
I'm just wanting to know when you die. This is my question for when someone from my family died. I really wanted to search for where they went to, and are we going to meet them again?
It is very difficult to know. There is some possibility, and I'm not talking about these flaky seances and stuff, which is mostly all a lot of crap, actually. People get into these things, these spiritual mediums, just because somebody is coming to you in a very subtle form and saying something. Why should you believe that or accept it? I mean, I had this lady telling me one time that, these things come and talk to her, and I go, well, why don't you just tell me that you were walking up there on Ponsonby Road and some drunk bumped into you and started telling you something? Should I believe that? No. So why are you believing this, you know what I mean, this entity that's trying to influence? This is not a good place to be, delving in this thing. The reality is, it is difficult to know where somebody has gone unless there are very clear things, like if somebody has attained a state of great spiritual development, it is very clear where that one's going. Otherwise, it's not so clear. Will you meet them again? Yes, there is always a possibility, but there is no guarantee that you could even recognize. And usually we've become so grown, attached to the body that they had, and we want to sort of like identify that they're going to have some of those physical characteristics or something like that, and they may not. They may not. So yes, it is a fact that you can possibly encounter such a person, but, you know, a relative or friend. But what's important is to develop a really good spiritual understanding of what has occurred, so that we will feel sadness in the passing of someone that was close to us, but we should not have that sadness grow so much that it dominates our life. You know, the person that has died or left, they would not want that, right? They wouldn't want to see us in a state of suffering and great heartache and things. They wouldn't want that for us. Even if someone is like your enemy, you know what I mean? And life may have tried to hurt you. When it gets down to actual seeing someone in a suffering condition, most people don't want to see that for another. And the experience of death is so heavy for most people because it's just so unexpected and unknown. Many times I've seen people at the time of death go through tremendous transformation when they can actually embrace what's about to happen and what's going on, and they let go of things. There's a lot to be learned from actually being with someone and assisting them at that moment. So my experience is that people do not, even if there was someone that didn't wish you well in life, the experience is so heavy for them that they change. They give up that stuff. And they want to give up, they want to let that stuff go, because they feel at that time it's all just overwhelming and getting in the way of things. So that's about what I will say for now. Okay. Yes.
Just a question leading on to death, obviously this is more financial. But from my understanding in the Eastern philosophy, what is our understanding of unnatural sort of death, through accidents, and you mentioned suicide? How does one seem to prepare yourself for that? It's very hard.
Yeah. Well, I would probably only put suicide in the category of unnatural death. Maybe a couple of other things, but pretty much that. If you were talking about sudden death as unnatural, what do you...
Accidents or...
Okay, well, I mean, For me, an accident wouldn't be an unnatural death. It should be understood that my time has come, and connected with things that are attributed to my past activity, this will be the nature of my death. And what is unfortunate is that in such a case, a sudden heart attack or an accident or something, one has not had time, or one is not in a state where they can now prepare for that. And this is why it is important to live a life of actual understanding, so that when that event comes, it can be handled with understanding and with enlightenment, even though it came very suddenly. I mean, for one that is really on a spiritual path, they must understand and accept that I personally may not know when my death will occur and exactly what will be the circumstance. If I am intelligent, I will live my life in such a way that I am always prepared. Always prepared means to live a life of compassion, a life of caring, a life of responsibility. These are things, and a life of actually spiritual cultivation. These are the things that will add to my quality of life, and when my death occurs, it will also enhance that experience, make that experience all completely okay. Is that all right? We don't have much choice. That's actually the smart thing to do. Anybody else? Maybe.
What do you think about the animals there?
What do I think about?
The animal, we have cat and dog and
Yeah.
cat. And sometimes when we take them to bed, and then their violence, they put them to sleep. What can you do? Is it natural or,
Personally, I don't support the idea of putting anyone to sleep.
Yeah, that's what
I don't think that that's a good choice.
Why not, it happened to me. Then how can I come out of this guilt?
We have, it's okay, you can sit down. There is this reality that in life, sometimes, even though we may have something within our heart telling us, don't do this, that because of social pressure or our lack of understanding, we do something anyway. And then later we may regret that. But you must understand that quite often we will do things in life out of some ignorance, that we weren't enlightened enough, we weren't thinking clearly enough, we didn't understand enough. And so sometimes I make the wrong choice. And to feel sorry for that, to actually feel sorry for that is good. But to dwell in that is bad. I saw a good example. It's, when people want to live in the past and live with bad, mistakes that they've made. So it's kind of like driving and always looking in the rear vision mirror. If you're always looking in the rear vision mirror, you're going to end up in an accident or drive off the road. You must simply accept that in my life I have done things that maybe it wasn't the best choice. And I feel responsible and sorry for that. And I realize there's nothing I can do to change that. And I simply offer my prayer of, I'm very sorry for whatever wrong I have done to anyone under any circumstance. and I just have to go on with my life. And by going on with my life and living a better life because of these things that we learn, this is the best that we can do. Yeah? It's the best that we can do. Personally, we have tremendous regard for all life. We regard life as being sacred. Life is not something that you can kill. You can relocate someone by killing a body, but you can't kill the actual living being. We also understand that all life is equal. Life may show up in different life forms because of karmic things, but nonetheless, all life is equal, and we should have a reverence for all life. This is a healthy way to live. You will live a happier life, and you will leave this life in a much better condition if you do that. Okay, so this is kind of like, I think we've gone seriously over time. I'll get to you in a minute. What I'd like to just do, we'll just do a little guided meditation. This form of meditation that we use is called kirtan, and it's kind of like anybody can do it. We do it with music, and we use what's called mantra. Mantra is sacred sound or spiritual sound. And the one I would like to share with you is very simple and easy, only 3 words, 2 of them are the same. It is the transcendental sound Om, which means the highest truth or the absolute truth, or it can mean other things that are far more wonderful also. And this word Hari. So the mantra is very simple, Om Hari Om. My father, he would ask me to chant with him the last few days I was with him. And so we would chant, and sometimes it'd go on for like 3 or 4 hours. I would use different types of kirtan. And you'd see, I'd turn around, and it's like the doctors and nurses and these other old people that are, soon to die. Everybody's packed in the room. Because there's just this feeling of protection, of great, it's like you're enveloped in this wonderful spiritual experience. And a person can use this type of thing to assist someone through the death experience and to assist ourselves so that we can experience everything in a very wonderful way. So with kirtan meditation, you have somebody that will lead the chanting. So I'll chant this mantra twice just because it's easier with this particular melody. And then I will ask you to also participate. You do it, and then I do it, and we do it together, and I do it. And Radha mentioned earlier that we do a meditation class at Paramaramu, maximum security prison. We've got all these hardened guys in there, and we're like 6 weeks into this meditation journey, and they've become like, they've gone from the hardcore tough guys to like young boys, and they're just like, they love it. And they're having this wonderful internal growth and coming to all of these personal realizations as a result of this practice. So don't worry about what your voice sounds like, and you don't have to sing very loud. But I do ask you to participate, and maybe if everybody can close their eyes, we'll probably feel a lot more comfortable.